Okay, I'm starting the recording now. So I want this session to be as interactive as possible. So despite the fact that we're quite a few students, or we should be, and we're online, I nevertheless want it to be as interactive as possible because it's more fun that way. So I'll be working with the Padlets. So if you can click on the Padlet, which I put up in I shared the link at the top of the chat function, and you can put down which program you're on. So this is week 1 of the 4-week Academic English and Writing for Masters course. And I very much hope and anticipate it'll give you a great deal of help because you only have a year to complete your Masters and you want to get off on the right foot. And if the vast majority of you coming from different learning cultures, then it'll be really important to kind of adjust and get used to the academic culture in the UK. So because you're all in an organisation that I've created, we can run things throughout the year, which I think is great. So I can run different workshops and we can have small sessions. And in addition to this course, starting from next week, I'll be running separate workshops. So on a Wednesday afternoon, I'll email you about that. And also on a Thursday, every third or fourth Thursday, I will hold a live global writing cafe. So there'll be a space in the library. On the left-hand side, it's called Relax and Renew. So I will be there between 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock in this area. It's a big table, and any student can come along with any issue they have with language or writing, and I'll be able to help them. So, okay, we're just going to go, and if you've got any questions, then put something in the chat so I can keep an eye on it. And any questions at all you don't understand, the chances are that other people will not be able to understand it either. So I'll just go through the introduction and the outcomes. So expectations are setting the standard. We will be, this is all this week, exploring essential features of academic writing. Which day do you mean? What day do you mean? Do you mean for the Global Writing Cafe? That will start on a Thursday. The date hasn't been decided yet. It'll be in. I put the Padlet in the link at the top of the chat. At the very start of the chat, I put the link to the Padlet. Okay, so just click on it when you get it. Okay, we'll be exploring essential features, the degree of formality of academic vocabulary, the use of the passive voice, sentence length, ways of expressing caution, paragraph structure, coherent flow of ideas, improving accuracy and clarity. So these are all the things. So essentially, you want to have all your assignments, your coursework, your case studies, your reports, even your dissertation that comes next term, next trimester. You want it to be all packaged up nicely. Okay, so these are the academic values. So coming to university in the UK and at GCU, there are certain academic values that everybody adheres to. So you'll be developing essential skills to integrate ideas from the literature into your writing. So those are the sources, using academic integrity to acknowledge the work of authors. So see number 3 there, using academic integrity to acknowledge the work of authors. So put in the chat, what do I mean by acknowledging the work of authors? What term is used to describe that? What academic term is used? Good, excellent. Citing and referencing. So those are the things that are really important in you acknowledging the work of other authors. And there'll be a workshop on the 26th of October, which goes into it in a lot more depth and the ways to be able to integrate other sources. You'll be developing use of essential academic grammar, vocabulary and style, and avoiding grammatical, vocabulary and stylistic errors common to international students. So in the chat here, can you put in one of the aspects of grammar you find the most challenging? What aspects of grammar do you find the most challenging? Or when you're doing your writing, what aspects? Okay, syntax. Okay, anybody else? Yes, referencing. That's always something that comes up. So there's always little things that, okay, for writing and rewriting. Format, okay. Yep. So quite often, I think once we've got style and formatting and layout and presentation, once you know best how to format, to lay out, and how to structure your work, then knowing exactly how to incorporate ideas and other people's ideas using the correct referencing and in sharp and concise language, it'll become a lot easier. Okay. So this is setting the standards. So your master students, thesis vocabulary for literature review. Okay, so your master students, so you are now part of the GCU academic community, and you'll be communicating with other postgraduate students, and you will also be using research from academics in your field, whether it be engineering or cybersecurity or climate justice, whatever area you are in, you'll be communicating with other people. And you've got standards to adhere to. So you must have evidence of adequate and appropriate background reading. Okay, I'm going to ask you this here. Where are you going to get your reading from? Where does your reading come from? The library. Good. So, yep, research papers, journals, online books, publications. Okay, so library. So why would you not use Google? Yeah, websites. Why would you not use Google? As a general rule, why should you avoid using Google? Yes, Google has the wrong information sometimes. So anybody can post anything and you can bring it up in Google. Yes, exactly. So it's credibility. It's got to be accurate. It's got to be valid. It's got to be reliable. It's got to be authentic. All these issues. So if you use the GCU library, you'll have access to a far greater reach of materials than you would. Aha, yes, plagiarism happens. The dreaded plagiarism. You've got, through the GCU library and copyright, you've got access to a far greater medium, a far greater spectrum of material, all within your various disciplines. So when this is the standard for master students, the clear statement of aims and relevant selection of content. So whatever you are doing, you must have an aim. Whether you're doing an assignment, whether you're doing a case study, a thesis, your dissertation, you need to be answering a question or demonstrating something. So you must have something in your head. Sensible planning and organisation, evidence of systematic thought and argument. So can you put in the chat, what do you think is one of the primary differences between undergraduate and plagiarism thinking or ways of working? What do you think is one of the biggest differences? Yes, Amir, you can use a valid website. Lazy. Aha. So, Paul, are you saying you're lazy in undergraduate and not lazy in postgraduate? Or are you referring to the Google search? Between undergraduate and postgraduate. Yes. Okay. Time, yes, you're quite right. Time management. So one of the biggest issues at postgraduate level, depending if you've come straight from overseas or whether you've spent 4 years at, or whether you've spent 4 years at GC or at university in the UK, at undergraduate level, at postgraduate level, you're required to put in a great deal more emphasis on critical analysis and evaluation. rewriting or writing a thesis with low vocabulary. Okay, I've got that. So when you're doing a postgraduate, when you're doing a master's course, you'll be required to think more. You're using and the argument you have built and your clarity of expression. So basically you're critically working and you're analysing and evaluating at a greater depth. And also, yes, so your ability to be able to paraphrase and to summarise becomes a lot greater. And there you go, evidence of systematic thought and argument, clarity of expression. So, for example, you wouldn't say a long time ago. You wouldn't say about or around. You avoid generalizations. Everything has to be precise and accurate. Careful presentation, for example, accurate typing, proofreading, helpful diagrams, observation conventions, and academic discourse, including bibliographic information, observation of length requirements. So, I'll type that in. If your assignment is, say, 3,000 words, how much are you usually allowed to go under or over in percent? It'll usually be determined by the coursework outline. Yes, good. It's usually 10%. So don't go over and don't go under, because you'll be penalised. And at your stage in the game, you don't want to be penalised for things that you can avoid. In fact, it's probably easier to cut work down rather than to add to it. So these are I know it seems an awful lot, but there are certain things, there are certain structures. So the way I look at it isn't a complicated way. So you're producing a piece of work and you've got basic scaffolding, and the scaffolding you use are the basic tools and the outlines you can use to be able to produce your work in a good, precise and compelling standard. First things, who's your audience? Okay, is your audience somebody in the street? Is it for only your classmates? Is it for your program leader? Is it for the university? Is it for other academics? Yes, academic people. Okay, good. So is it academic people in your field, or is it academic people in total? Because if you're working in a program that's subject specific vocabulary, and your audience is out with that, you may need, okay, program leader or supervisor, in which case some terminology that is relevant within your field, you don't have to explain. If it was out with your field, you would have to. Okay, experts in the field. What is style? Written and spoken, use of personal pronouns. So put in the chat, what do I mean by a personal pronoun? The dreaded personal pronouns. What do I mean by a personal pronoun? Yep, I, me, mine, good. I, me, you, we. These are all personal pronouns. Him, her, exactly. Another thing is one. So you want to avoid saying one says, because who is one? That's a bit that's not quite correct to use that. So formal language, avoid expressions that are too, I'm sure you know this from undergraduate, but this is just a reminder. Avoid expressions that are too informal, unsophisticated, vague, exaggerated, or subjective. So avoiding things like a great thing and lots more, and yes, it is said. Yes, if you say it is said, you could follow it up by saying it is said by so-and-so. So general things like that, you really do have to watch what you're saying, because although sometimes you don't want to put in such reporting vocabulary that it seems that it's too vague. So remember, every word you put in, every sentence has to actually say something. It actually has to have a meaning. So if you go further up, who's your audience? And it's got to have a meaning for everything. So use your formal language. Use, when you're doing your reading, and you've got articles and you've got your research papers, use the kind of language that's used in there. Okay, kind of go up a little bit. In fact, I'll give it at the end. There's lots of websites you can use. So, and it's worth, taking a risk with your language. Start using different words. Try not to use Google Translate if you use that, or because you quite often get the wrong meaning. And try not to use ancient English. So be clear, back up with evidence. So when I say outcome of 5, it's further on in the slides here. So be clear, back up with evidence. So when you're saying something, when you have a sentence, your first sentence, back it up with something else. So peel is point. Sorry, I'm a bit slow here. Example, evidence, signpost. You make your point. Let me think of an example here. Okay, I'll give you a very poor example. Scotland is known for its high level of rainfall. Full stop. For example, Oban on the west coast of Scotland has so many millimetres of rain per year. Full stop. Often, due to this high rainfall in Oban, the banks of the river burst. Subsequently, we can see the other coastal towns and villages up the west coast. Okay, so I'm giving a point, I'm giving an example. An example repeats one of the words in the first sentence. I give the evidence and you signpost it. Now that is a very general, area there. But when you're doing something, you must always make sure that whatever you're saying means something to the sentence previously. You might be adding to it, you might be refuting it, you might be exaggerating it, you might be, disputing it, whatever. Be objective, avoid sweeping generalizations. Now, I'm going to put up a Padlet. You just give me a second. Point and example be the same? I guess it can. I suppose it really depends. There's a Padlet there. I suppose it really depends on what you're doing, because a lot of your work is not necessarily argumentative, it's not necessarily descriptive. So sometimes, depending on the context of your work, yes, you could just be given an example. So if you click on the Padlet, I like Padlets, by the way, and I use them a lot. Plus, it means that they're always, so if you click on it, you'll be able to go along and you can be able to see what I'm talking about. So for example, under academic style, I put examples of pronouns, and then avoid the 3 C's, contractions, cliches, colloquialisms. Okay, be objective, avoid sweeping generalizations, admit to limitations, the flaws and shortcomings. So that is another difference between undergraduate and postgraduate. You'll be moving on to dissertations later, but if you're doing research on something, it's absolutely fine to say that whatever area of research you're doing, there are limitations in it. For example, if we were doing some research on the impact of COVID-19, the limitations could be that, it's quite a recent thing. There's not as much research being done yet. So don't be afraid to admit to limitations, flaws, and shortcomings. That demonstrates you've got a good level of thinking, and you've kind of thought about whether you're presenting a fact, writing a report, putting forward an argument. Okay. Is everybody okay so far? Good. So differences in disciplines. Okay, so disciplines, this is kind of like, I suppose, undergraduate to postgraduate. So, and then when you get your first courseworks and things, then you'll be able to possibly, well, hopefully, think a little bit more about how things are to be structured. There's lots of, and I'll tell you, there are lots of different kind of tools and things you can use. So differences, descriptive writing, introduce, critical writing, you organize and evaluate the evidence. Okay, somebody is so critical writing, somebody's made a point and you want to exemplify that point, meaning give an example, or you want to refute it, you want to say, nah, that's no good. So you need to be able to find the work of other authors, other scholars, and you'll be able to evaluate the impact that work has had. So as we go down the line there, here during the trimester, we can do ways of integrating sources. So on the left there, presenting facts. On the right, make comparisons between materials. Describe how an experiment was carried out. Analyze why something didn't work. When you're presenting something, as I said, you want to link. You can often use the word, this demonstrates. I like that phrase or sentence. Sentence starter. This demonstrates that. So whenever you make a point, what is the point? What impacts has it had? What's the evidence therefore that you brought in? So this demonstrates that. So down there, list details, for example, the resources used. When you're doing critical writing, you're applying your own judgment. On the left-hand side, you're outlining areas of knowledge, making links between areas of knowledge. So you're outlining, you're describing, so the reporting word outline, and then as you go up a level, up to postgraduate level, you're making links between those areas of knowledge. This shows that, this demonstrates that, this surmises that, it would appear that. Okay, quote from writers in the field, weigh up alternatives, provide informational data, evaluate, argue, or contest. Okay, so undergrad, you might just be providing information, and then when you go up a little bit of a level, then you can say this is contested by so and so who pointed out that, etc., etc. And then descriptive writing, you're summarizing. Critical writing, you'll be drawing conclusions. So there's quite often a little bit to get your head round when it comes to the different kind of levels, but as you go through it, you'll become much more adept at learning what, you know, what's the best thing to do. For example, you are masters in your field, so when you are reading journal articles, when you're looking for evidence for something, you're the judge, you're the boss, so you can look for resources that answer your question. Okay. Structure, the conventional structure, introduction, body, and conclusion. So look at the Padlet. I think it's along the way there. I've got paragraph structure, slide 8. Organize sentences into coherent paragraphs of reasonable length. A paragraph could be as short as 1 or 2 sentences, but usually not longer than half a page. Start a new paragraph when you change thoughts or ideas. Okay, let me ask you this. When you do a paragraph, do you miss a line or do you indent it? Do you miss a line or do you indent it? Indent. Okay, anybody else? Yeah, miss a line. Yeah. So all depends on your personal preference, but whatever your preference is, kind of stick to it. Yes, I tend to have a new line, and don't be afraid to use new paragraphs, because the tendency is to make one big long paragraph. So a paragraph should be a neat little organization of the same idea. Okay, so you could have your topic sentence, your point, your example, your evidence, your evaluation, and then the link to the next paragraph, if you're doing a continuous essay. Organisation, a logical progression of ideas or flow of ideas in the body. So we'll be covering that in week 3. But if you look at the Padlet again, organisation. That's again under paragraph structure and the long sentences. So, an academic paragraph needs a topic sentence, evidence which supports your point, explanation of why it's important, and link to the next or previous paragraph. Okay, so put in the chat thing, what's a topic sentence? When I've got a paragraph there, what do I mean by a topic sentence? Yeah, good. Yep. So the topic sentence, so I kind of look at things in pictures. So the way I look at it, so you've got a paragraph there. The way I look at topic sentence is, you're quite right, it's the main idea. So it's the window to the rest of the paragraph. So you want to introduce the reader to what the paragraph is going to be about. So it needs to be a bold, a clear, and a concise sentence. Okay, if it's a report, it's like a standalone sentence, or if it runs on for the next one, you need to make clear what's happening with it. So you're introducing a new idea, or you're making a statement. Okay, so that's the topic sentence, and then usually you'll have evidence which supports your point, explanation why it's important, and then you link to the next or the previous paragraph, depending on what you're doing. Depending on what kind of report you're doing, or whether you're doing something, whether it's an argument, or whether you're presenting research. But it's very important to have like the main point at the very beginning. So make it strong, and have a strong noun or strong verbs or whatnot in it. And I'll talk about sentences. I'm not quite sure if that comes next. Okay, here we are. Okay. Sentences, the joy of the long sentence. So you don't need long sentences. So have a look at the Padlet. Now I'll put those glasses on. Okay, so you should be able to look at that. So the poor sentence example. This is as with everything, these equipment pieces have height and distance requirements which are laid out in the ground plans. These are adjusted at the installation night, but always must be double checked before they are commissioned. So, is that sentence understandable? Do you understand that sentence? Put in the chat whether you understand that sentence. Yeah, exactly. It's too long. Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you can understand it, Paul, because I don't really. It's like a fragment of a sentence. So I think what happens is everybody's got great ideas and know what they want to say. The ideas are in the head, and then you write them down as though you're speaking. So that's what's usually. So when you're doing something like that, you just need to pick out the main ideas of what you want to put down, and then put them down in a much more concise fashion. So use clear and simple sentences, yep, and arrange them in logical order. Order is crucial. So yes, a compound sentence. Coordinators join ideas equal in value. So go back to the Padlet. So coordinators are the words which join two sentences into a compound sentence. So they're just little words which, if you think about it, they coordinate. So which words coordinates this compound sentence? So a report from World Bank 2012 suggests that annual per capita emission of carbon is in 49 least developed countries is around 0.3 metric tons per capita of carbon, where only in China carbon emission, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so which word in that sentence is the coordinator? Which word in that sentence is the coordinator? Exactly. So coordinators, so don't be frightened of them. Coordinators are words that join two parts of the sentence up, okay? And both sentences are of equal value. So they're really good, and you can use them to give examples, or you can use them to disagree with something. Good, so that's a coordinator. Okay, now I know this is very grammatical, but subordinators enable you to express a much wider range of meaning and create complex ideas, and ideas do not have to have the same value. Example, she refused his proposal, though he follows her daily. So try and, back to the Padlet, try and vary the way that you do your writing. So if you go down under long sentences, you'll see common subordinators. Okay, so although, as though, because, so that, whereas, though, till, unless. So these subordinators are really good, and they provide a much better, kind of more complex way of putting your sentence forward. In fact, I think I've got there. Yeah. Okay. So fanboy. Some examples of coordinate. You might find it useful to remember the acronym, and I never remember it. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. So these are really good ways. These are really good ways of making complex sentences, but not overly complex. You can have a short sentence and use somebody's subordinators, okay? Or you can use a small coordinator to make your compound sentence. Okay, so it doesn't have to be long and it doesn't have to be complicated. Okay, but what it does show is it shows that you're appreciating the sentence and you're adding value to it, and you're showing some sense of engagement with it and critical appraisal. The passive voice. Active. Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin. Penicillin was discovered. So I'll put a sentence here. This is one that I always use. It's probably a poor example. Okay, there's my poor example. The dog bit the man. Okay, so that's active. Okay, so can you type in what the passive is? Now, I learned this at school. I think everybody did. The dog bit the man. Sentence round. Yes, the man was bitten by the dog. Yeah, the man was bitten by the dog. So basically, you're making the subject the object. So bitten, yeah, good. So bitten is actually a past participle. Past participle. So if anybody has such a thing as a dictionary, like a paper dictionary, you will find usually in the back this past participles. So I'll give you an example here. Now this is quite grammatical. So given. Given is a past participle. What is the past tense? Good. Gave. Smashing. Now, if anybody here is from Glasgow, I don't know if anybody is from Glasgow, but if anybody is from Glasgow, the Glaswegians or born Glaswegians or some other parts of Scotland tend to use the past simple instead of the past participle. But anyway, so the passive voice can be used in scientific engineering, that type of writing. Not overly, don't use it too much, but that's another way of changing your writing. It's also another good way of paraphrasing. I better keep an eye on time. So write with conviction and authority. Conviction shows you have a firm belief, and authority shows you have knowledge. It is also important to exercise caution with hedging. Modal verbs used to indicate logical possibility, tend to, could, may, could be said that, but be careful. Look at the Padlet again. Yes, precision writing. Put it under precision writing. In the third past participle, third form. Yes, Mohammed. There is. Yes, because he gave is the third form of the verb, and given is the past participle. But although, I mean, it's quite interesting looking at dictionaries. I mean, I know most people are online, but it's quite good to be able to actually look at dictionary, or even go online and look at the Oxford Dictionary. So, exercise caution with hedging verbs. So here's an example. The Internet of Things can give a new dimension to the internet and can contribute to extensive financial gains, but it also faces some challenges. So can is the use of the modal verbs there. So exercise caution with it, otherwise if you use it too much it appears there's no substance to your work. Reporting verbs. They reflect the degree of certainty of the claim. So look again at your Padlet, and then you'll see it just about at the end there, reporting verbs. So have a look at that. States, claims, asserts. They can go from negative, neutral to positive. A coherent flow of ideas. So your ideas have to flow. So often you'll find sentences that just drop out of the sky and then they sit there in the page, and the sentences, there's no flow in the paragraph. Okay, so there's no flow in your work. So some way you've got to adopt a way of making sure that your sentences flow from one into the other. Reference pronouns, it, this, these, those to link ideas. Let me think. I'm thinking of an example here. Scotland has, I'll see using this excuse. Scotland has, sorry, repetition of words, I'll go into the next one. Scotland has a high level of rainfall, full stop. The level of rainfall can be demonstrated by, okay, by blah, blah, blah. Meteorological, this, that, the next thing. It, so you use pronouns, but try not to use them in more than 2 or 3 sentences, otherwise you lose your way. Repetition of words is fantastic. It's a really good way of making sure that the reader knows exactly what's going on. Logical connectors, adding an in addition, moreover, giving reasons, coherence between a paragraph. Coherence between paragraphs we'll do in week 3. Accurate use of language. So audience and framework, establish some background assumptions and terminology to set the stage for conveying information. If you're in a complex area or producing quite a detailed outline of something, you need to make sure that you've either got descriptions or the correct terminology set up from the start. Use your terminology precisely and consistently. Okay, so for example, temperatures. You'll work in a different area from me, obviously, but make sure you've got your temperatures, measurements, countries, numbers, dates, weather, all these specifications. Make sure you've got them spot on. And it's called the signal to noise ration. Minimize ambiguity and fuzziness. So check out the Padlet. Go click in the Padlet. Ambiguous writing. Call me a taxi. No, I can't read this. Call me a taxi. You want me to get you a taxi or tell you you're a taxi? See, that's ambiguous. So you don't want any of that. Conciseness. Do not use many words when a few words suffice. Example, change. Yeah. Change. The computer is able to make use of the software too. The computer can use the software. So to make use of is redundant. Okay, so there's no need to kind of fill up your Fill up your words. In a postgraduate assignment, you need to read and report what has been written and also to evaluate and criticise where appropriate. You need to reference. Okay, so can you put in the chat how many of you would like a helping hand with how to integrate sources and acknowledge them? How many of you feel that you want a helping hand with it over the next week or two? Yeah. Yeah, I think, okay, good. I think often it's not trying to cheat, although sometimes it can be a bit tempting, but there are all sorts of other factors. And if I run the workshop, or we're doing it next week, plus I'll be doing a further workshop in week 26, there are lots of things you can do to avoid, because the university take it quite seriously. You don't want to be had up for something because it will affect your mark. Lots of ways around it, or lots of ways to get to grips with it. So yeah, so whilst advice on referencing is often about the mechanics of a particular style, it's more important to learn how to integrate those references into your writing. So it's fair enough knowing how to do the reference list at the end and knowing that within it, you have to have the author and the date. Sometimes it's a case of learning how to incorporate it. Okay, so it's fair enough you've got an article there, you want to bring his or her opinion or fact into your assignment. That's one thing. The second thing is knowing how to do it and how to do it effectively, so you're expressing the voice of the author. So this is achieved by a mixture of quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing the work of the authors you read or the official documents you use. Okay, so have a quick on Padlet, go to the end, and I put the label there. I put what constitutes plagiarism. Can you click on the little add button and then type in what you think plagiarism is? Everybody's different from our previous kind of our previous study background. Everybody has different ways of expressing what they think plagiarism is. Yeah, not giving credit to a source you've used. Good. Anybody else? I'll put in a few. I think somebody else is doing it there. Yes, theft of intellectual property, I assume IP is. Okay, good. Somebody's written there. Repeating the same wording. Yes, exactly. Now, here's something. Self-plagiarism. Self-plagiarism can be something, if you did an assignment or report in year 1 and you're now in masters or something, or even if you did it somewhere else, that is called self-plagiarism. So you can't actually copy your own work. If you've submitted something in first year or year 1, level 1, you're now in masters, you can't submit that same piece of work. Yeah, not stating the source of images and other media. That's really important when you're doing diagrams, images. You must always quote that kind of thing. So collusion, that means if you're writing a report and there's 4 of you writing a report and you kind of share ideas and you take somebody else's idea, that's plagiarism. So there's a lot of things to come to terms with. So that's something we can do next week. Okay, paraphrasing. And I actually watched a YouTube from University of Leeds on paraphrasing. And this was really interesting. So apparently there's a growing concern. Paraphrasing and lack of rules. So students aren't writing from sources, but writing from sentences selected from sources. So I'll give you the example here. What students, but it can be anybody, are doing is they're getting their source, they're getting an article, quickly whizzing through it, finding a sentence that they like, and then trying to paraphrase that sentence, and then drop that sentence into the assignment, and then possibly going to the end and finding another sentence, and then paraphrasing that sentence, and then dropping into the essay. So as a result, the meaning's kind of gone. So that's kind of something that's been happening more and more. So these are the transferable skills. Now these just come at the end. These are all the skills that you'll be able to walk away with. So I want you to go back to the Padlet side, and you've got academic style. So that is the style, that's formality. Use of the personal pronoun. I'll copy and paste the Padlet again. It was in the, oh, for those of you who weren't here at the beginning, sorry, you must have missed it. Okay? Sorry, I should have reposted it. We should have asked sooner. So that's the Padlet there. So if you go along to that Padlet, you will be able to see some of the things that I've been talking about. 10 features of academic writing: complexity, formality, precision, academic caution. Say something like, the weather in Scotland is always terrible because, oh, a cliche. A cliche is a commonly used expression, like following point. The following demonstrates a double-edged sword. So that's something that anybody who's, yes, all roads lead to Rome. That's it. What else? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it. I think that's one. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Always, yeah. Okay, please throw more light on academic style. Academic style, avoid the first person. Avoid I think, you think, we think, in my opinion. Okay, so you never use the personal pronouns, you never say in my opinion unless you're specifically asked. Okay, avoid contractions, so don't say can't, won't, I'll, cannot, will not, I will. Avoid cliches and avoid colloquialisms. So you're not going to say things like, you're not going to, sorry, that should have said gonna. I'm sure you all know that, going to. So you want to use, so don't use but, say however. Use, don't say words like get, say obtain, depending on the context, of course. So basically the style just means the style in which you're writing. So you will tend not to be writing the same way that you speak. You'll be writing in full sentences with correct punctuation. You won't be missing words. Okay, all that kind of thing. But now that we've got the Padlet, I will post the Padlet up into resources on our organisation, and I can add lots more things to it. Okay, so now I'm going to also post this up because I want to actually all know what program you're all doing. So I've got another Padlet here. Okay, you can see that it's called My Sweet Country. So you can actually add on it. No, it's not. It's called MSc Programs. MSc Program. So if you want to add to that, you want to look in it, and can you add which programs you're doing? I think there's climate justice, big data technologies, because I just want to know, because I know there have been issues with some students not registering, not being able to register. So this Padlet, okay. Environmental management, okay, good. Excellent. So I'm going to stop the recording now, but I'll continue speaking, and then I'll see you all next week.